Good morning, everybody. We'll see how long my voice lasts this morning. Anyway, just a couple of new things and some tools to use. A pretty straightforward day, I believe. And I would also like to go back and look at ifs again because we're going to be using them over and over, especially in the next lab where we do a male merge, and then we'll start using them a lot, or at least Boolean logic when we do the database part. So anyway, your assignment for next lab is 3 cases from the end of tutorial 8, and then there's another case problem here in the workbook. It works pretty much like the one from 6. There's some stuff for you to do here. There's another file out there for you to do, so on and so forth. All right. So anyway, let's move on. If something's true, do this. If it's not true, do that. Right? And so we've got a standard business problem here. We have a bunch of workers for us. They've worked on various days of the week. They submitted their number of hours that they worked, and we need to calculate how much money they received or earned for that week. Now, there's some rules to go with this. There's different pay grades, A, B, C, and N for new. So there's that. If you work on the weekend, Saturday or Sunday, you get 1.25 times your base pay. Okay. And in addition, if you work overtime, if you work more than 8 hours a week, you get an additional bonus. If it's between 8 and 10 hours, it's 1.5 times your pay. And if it's over 10 hours, it's twice your pay. Okay. And then lastly, we have this bonus pool where every quarter, if you work more than 50 hours in a week, we put your name on a slip of paper and we throw it in a jar. And at the end of each quarter, we draw a name out of the jar, and you win some sort of valuable prize. Okay. So we need to take care of all that sort of stuff. All right. So anyway, now, the thing I really want to show you this morning is how to attack something like this. It sounds simple, but when you start working at the details, you're going to find out it's pretty complex. And so here was my first whack at it, and I wrote that formula, where I was just trying to calculate Sunday's pay, and it's not working. And I said, So anyway, so moral of the story here is not to try to do this all at once, is to break it up. So what we should do on this, and then I'll show you how to put all the pieces together so you can write one. It looks like you wrote one big formula. So I'm just going to put some extra columns in here. All right. Well, one simple thing we can do is figure out what their base pay is. All right. We got this thing over here. We got this little table, and we can do something. Now we can either write that as an if or a VLOOKUP. I'm going to use a VLOOKUP here because I think it's a little bit easier. So we'll just put that in a column by itself and call it base pay. Equals VLOOKUP, open parentheses, their pay grade, comma, that little table starting with A all the way down to N and over to the next column, comma, and the answers coming out of column 2. And ABCN is in ascending order. It's in alphabetical order, so I don't have to worry about an exact match or rearranging the rows or anything. So I can just stop there with a close parentheses, and then I want to remember to make that table, lookup table, that part there, a absolute reference. Okay, and then I can copy that down. Why are they all, no, they're not all 15. Okay, now, but look here. Is that right? Right, pay grade A should be more than $15 an hour. B was right. So what's going on here? and so on and so forth. Well, what it turns out, and it's the same reason why this is causing problems over here, is if you look at B itself, it's not just B in that cell. If you look very closely at where my cursor is up there, or where your cursor might be, there's a space there. That's B space. B space is a character string, just like BE or BA or whatever. The space is a character like any other character, and so it has, it's part of the oscillation and stuff. So that's what's messing this up here. So I'm going to just take that space out, and now things are working right. Okay? So again, I want to reinforce you have to be very careful about using VLOOKUPs because, actually, even the if here would have had the same problem. But you want to be careful about this stuff because it's easy enough to make mistakes. All right, so we got that part done. Now, each day has to be treated separately because it's the overtime is based on how many hours you work in a day. So we're going to have to, obviously we have to break this up into 7 steps. So we'll just start with Sundays here. Equals. If. Now we have to check to see how many hours they worked. If the hours that they worked on that day is, say, greater than 10, then they get that multiplier of 2. So what we're trying to do here is figure out the multiplier. Okay, so if that's true, if the person worked more than 10 hours that first day, they get a multiplier of 2, and the formula stops at that point, right? That's all the further it goes in that if statement. If that's not true, then we want to tell it what to do next. So we have a comma. And the thing we want to do next is check to see if they worked more than 8 hours. So to do that, we'd have to have another if here. And we could check the hours again. If it's greater than 8, then they're going to get a new multiplier, right? Well, we know it's not bigger than 10, or we've never got to this far in the formula. So we're someplace between 8 and 10, and the rule here is they get time and a half. If that's not true, then they've worked 8 or less hours that week, and so their multiplier would be 1. So we can put that in there. And then 1 close parentheses for the inner if, and then a second close parentheses because we've covered all possibilities, right, like that. Okay. So that person worked 11 hours. They should get, the double. And copy this thing down. This guy didn't work. He worked no hours, so obviously there's going to be a 1. Here's a 1.5. Now that person worked 10 hours, and it's over. The rule is over 10 hours, so that's right, and so on. So when you do this sort of stuff, you want to check, several rows throughout your thing to make sure that your formula is working right. All right. So now we've got we've got the hours worked, the base pay, the multiplier. So we want to put that together into a formula here, calculate his pay for that day. So we would just say here equals hours times base pay times multiplier. And this happens to be on Sunday, right? So it's a weekend day, so we've got yet another multiplier here, so we say times 1.25 times. Something like that. And so that's their pay for that day. Okay. All right. Questions so far here? Okay, so we just broke it up into steps that we can deal with, just simpler little problems, and we've got the whole thing done. Well, now to do this, we'd have to have a whole series of columns for each one of these. We're going to have like essentially two columns for each day, and we're going to end up with a whole bunch of extra columns. So what we could do is we could do that, and then we're going to paste everything together. So let me just show you how to do the paste, and we'll move on. Here, look at this right here, right? In O4 and P4, those don't have numbers in them, right? All they have are formulas. In O4, there's that formula, and in P4, there's that formula, right? So in this over here, what we're saying is that P4 is not a number, it's a formula. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that formula and substitute into where P4 is. And it's pretty easy to do. You just come over to P4, highlight everything but the if, or you want to highlight all the formula that you want to copy. Whoops, let's try that, there we go. And then you just copy that to the clipboard, however you want to do that. Then you push the escape key to get out of the edit mode, and you go to where you want to paste that. So it's in this formula here, and there's P4, which we know is just a formula, so we can take P4 out of there, and then we can paste that formula in there. And I'll just push enter here, and I'm going to go back to O4. I'm going to copy that formula minus the equal sign. I'm going to basically follow the same. Oops, let's try this again. I'm going to follow the same procedure. Copy the part of the formula I want, push the escape key to get out of the edit mode, go over to where I want to paste that part of the formula over here. Okay, because I know O4 is just a formula, so I'm going to take the O4 out, and I'm going to post or paste the formula there, like that. Okay. Then push enter, and I get that 550 again. Okay? So instead of me trying to write this big complex formula, and it's not easy to do because there's so many details there, and you know, even the best of programmers will get lost because we can only handle so many details at a time. Break it up into several columns. When you're all done, when you're sure everything's working right, you can just copy and paste everything together, and you can build a big formula like that. Okay. Now, it seems like it's slower this way or more inefficient, but in practice, it's not, because what happens is if you try to write a formula like this, which is what I tried to do, and I made my best attempt at it. I didn't try to fake anything here. There's a lot of things going on in that formula, and I made one. And you know how easy it is to make a mistake in a formula, right? So there's a mistake floating around in there someplace, and I have no idea where it is. So now I have to spend a lot of extra time trying to figure out what's wrong with the formula. Like, it could be, the first part, the second part, who knows? But it takes me a lot longer to find it. By doing it in this approach, the second approach here, as soon as I wrote that part of the formula, I saw that there was something wrong. And so I know that there's a problem there, and I can fix it. It's easy for me to figure out what's wrong because I only have to look in a few places to figure out what's going wrong. When you're writing complex formulas like this, the thing that takes the most time is making sure they work right. And if you follow this process, it'll do a lot shorter. Now, obviously what we could do here, this is for Sunday, right? So then we could do the same for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So our formula here, this is only 1/7 of our formula, right? So we could do this whole thing, and we could have this, 7 times as long, and that would be the whole thing, and people think we're some kind of genius. But we're not. We just took the simple way out to do that sort of stuff. Okay? So questions about that? All right, the not. The not's the other Boolean operator that I didn't talk about last time, like and or. All the not does is change a true to a false and a false to a true. It just changes to the opposite value. Sometimes it's easier to state a Boolean proposition in the negative as opposed to the positive. For example, I was not born in New York is a lot easier to say and think about in saying I was born in either Alabama or Arkansas or California or Colorado or so on and so forth, right? It's just easier to say and understand. I wasn't born in New York. Okay, and that's either true or false, and it's pretty easy to figure out, right? So sometimes it's not just an easy way to do that sort of stuff. I can just say, so to do that, you'd say, like if you had a column where, you know, my birthplace was and it had, you know, the state there, you would just say not, open parentheses, that state equals NY, close parentheses. So it would check to see if, you know, the state that I was born in was New York, it would be either true or false, and then not just changes it to the other value. All right. So in this instance here, the bonus is only available to full-time, or not, it's not available to new people. All right. You have to work there a certain number of years, say like a year or whatever, before you're eligible for that bonus pool. So in here, we could do something like equals if hours is greater than 50, comma. If that's true, then we want to check to see if you're eligible for the bonus pool. Then you could say if your pay grade, well, actually we want to say if you're, well, if we say this, if this equals n, okay, but we want the opposite of that, so what we would have to do then is, well, we could do it this way. You could just put a not in front of this. Would be one way to do it. Okay. So it checks inside to see if their pay grade is n. If that's true, we want, you know, we don't want that. We want it false. So you would just set it up that way, and then you could put, I don't know, we could just put true or false here. And why didn't that come out right? If it's not N4, it's, I picked the wrong column, it's M4. Try that. There you go. Okay. When it comes to Booleans, usually there's several different ways to set up a proposition, to test it and stuff like that, and the best one's the one you understand. All right.
Can you go over that formula one more time?
This one?
Yeah.
Sure. First, we check to see if they've worked more than 50 hours that week, to see if they're even eligible to be in the pool or not. All right? So if that's true, then we want to check to see if their pay grade is A, B, or C. Okay. And so that means the other way to state that is that you're not a new person. All right? So we're going to state this in the negative this time. It's eligible for everybody who's not new. So in here, we check first to see if they're new. Okay, that's what the E4 equals N. If they're new, we don't want them, so we want the opposite of that. So we want that when that's false. So we just we put a non out there, and that makes it. So the way that would work, if E4 is A, let's say the first person there. Well, the first person there is B, right? So B does not equal N, right? Think about this first person right here. This B does not equal N, so that means that this proposition in here is false. But we just flip that over to true, which is what we want. If that's, I don't want to get too deep into this because, again, if it's easier for you to state in the positive, state it in the positive. But that's what it's for. And so we just check to see if they're new, and if they're new, we don't want them. If they're not new, we want them. So we can just flip the value there and do that sort of stuff. There's only I can come up with probably about 4 different ways off the top of my head to state that thing in Boolean algebra. Okay. Anyway, I don't want to get too, this is not a course in Boolean algebra, so we're not going to spend a lot on that. So, your turn. On P1, you need to calculate a person's age, round it down to the nearest integer. There's this body mass index. There's the formula for that. You need to calculate that, round that off to the nearest tenth. And then there's these factors using, again, stuff like we did last week, just some more practice. The first 4 factors you can do with just ands and ors and nots. You don't need ifs for those. The 5th one, you do need an if statement. All right. So go ahead and give that a shot, and we'll see what's going on.